Oh wow, look at that. I actually made a video this long and it didn't take me 500 years. I've been someone who's been falling out of love with the Yakuza series for some time now. And I definitely think Yakuza 6 was what broke the series for me. Not because it was terrible, even though it was, but because I've had to sit through so much of the same fucking story that I couldn't help but find the thing to be one giant parade that was a little too proud of itself. With me starting with Yakuza 4, Kiryu always felt like the lamest character in the cast that I was expected to identify with. And I know that this comment alone is enough for all 5 of my viewers to dox me, but for a while I thought that the main issue with Yakuza 6 was that it took away all of the unique fighting styles, sanded down all my favorite characters into supporting roles, and was more content to watch its physics engine shit itself than actually let me punch people. I know not having played all the games robbed me of some of the emotional punch, but in my mind, if you're making a game that was built to appeal to about enough people to push the residence limit on a hot dog stand, then forgive me for thinking that maybe your game should have been more universally appealing. Also, the Song of Life. That has to be one of the most pretentious names I've ever fucking heard. What are you, a choir song? The point is, there was another game in the franchise that also brought things back to one character, dropped all my favorites, and used the Dragon engine, but it didn't make my life hell in the process. If I was better at what I do, I'd make this game a bigger mystery, but you could see the title, and I'm a hack clown, so let's all agree to let me put Judgement on the top of the screen in pleasant font as the reveal and move on. Judgement is a self-branded legal drama taking place in the same Yakuza universe we know and love, and it is a sequel to that universe in the same way that a red apple is the sequel to a green apple. Same flavor, size, and feel, but different color smacked on top. Okay, well, apple tastes different, but shut the fuck up, I'm making a point here. I've sat through enough English classes to know that I'm probably going to be bashing the same thing I'm praising, but that's kind of my thing, and if the special ed teachers could handle it, so can you. I know explaining video game stories is never all that exciting, but bear with me. The main thing that separates Judgement from its contemporaries is that instead of being a rough ex-Yakuza that inflicts possibly fatal injuries on the people of Tokyo, you are now a rough ex-lawyer that inflicts absolutely fatal injuries on people. It's a bit jarring that the story cutscenes have this very righteous feel to them before you go back out into the street and create miniature civil suits. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but playing so many Yakuza games has left me with the feeling that Kamurocho is about the size of a community college, with about twice as many liberal arts majors taking themselves way too fucking seriously. Thankfully, this is a video game, so I can suspend my disbelief as long as I can project onto the protagonist hard enough, which leads me to Yagami. Yagami is not the strongest protagonist. There is nothing morally complicated, and outside of one general chip on his shoulder, there is no particular room for him to grow as a character either. Thankfully, he's the central piece to one of my favorite genres in storytelling, murder mystery. Now, I'm not going to pretend that there's any deep value in murder mystery. In fact, by most conventions of genre, it's pretty fucking limited, but thankfully, Judgement isn't above towing the best parts of this without bogging itself down with shitty side crap to make it look like more than it is. The setup is, disgraced lawyer turned detective Takayuki Yagami has been hired to defend the smuggest douchebag in the whole city for possibly taking part in the murder of some low-hung street tough. I guess it's worth mentioning now, but for a world dominated by organized crime, the Yakuza series has always been low on death. That's not even in the main cast. People just don't usually die in these constant turf wars. In fact, from what I can tell, the height of crime in this game is cornering a guy and politely asking him for money before you're turned into mush by a main character that was just passing by. I guess being a liberal arts student means you're just immune to pain until the graduation. Your defense for this killing in question is shaky at best. He was last seen speaking to your defendant and found an hour later next to a dumpster with his eyes gouged out. I know my unwavering sarcastic shithead voice makes me sound like I'm over this, but I actually think the setup is quite engaging. I'm a bit of a sucker for legal drama, and the fact that I ran a Danganronpa Tumblr in my teens probably says more about me than I'd like it to, but I think the way the story is told toes the line just right so that you're close enough to the action to keep things fun, but also getting just enough drama at a time to build up a solid mystery. Of course, being a Yakuza game, this can be fucking weird sometimes, meaning that you have to beat the guy patiently in court and then you smash his teeth out on a rooftop, which is the closest video game stories will ever come to bridging the gap between Way of the Dragon and 12 Angry Men. As much as getting your eyes gouged out is a terrible way to die, even after you win in court and your man goes free, he quickly starts getting in the way of things, threatening you and becoming the story's closest thing to a main villain until you unmask the true killer. Because of course he's going to pursue the true killer, it's a detective game. Yagami simply refers to this killer as the mole, but don't worry, I won't say anything more on that part until later. While I am on the topic of characters, I will admit that this has one of the greatest English dubs I've ever seen. Considering that Yakuza is known for never localizing their games past simple subtitles, it's surprising to see just how big of a cast they brought together for this this game. Not to mention that they basically just made an Overwatch reunion party, which, hey, I'm not complaining. Especially when the characters are created with a solid amount of depth and creativity to them that really allows this choice in casting to excel. And I know there's plenty of smug cunts out there that want to tell me how great the Japanese dub is while stuffing cotton in their ears, but I for one appreciate the talent on hand here. And if you want to tell me that Spike fucking Spiegel isn't going to carry his role, then maybe you should follow the next step and light the cotton on fire. Combat's a bit iffy for me due to not having really liked the combat since Yakuza 5, but I have fucking ADHD, meaning the best way to invest me in your game is to throw out the rules every few hours and give me completely new ones. For some reason, everyone in this city has both a bone to pick and a bone to break, cause Yagami can't go down one street without putting 5 men in the hospital, which is generally done through a very old school style brawling system with a focus on dodging and building up your heat gauge in order to pull off special attacks. Judgement sticks with one central playable character who can swap between 2 different fighting styles depending on the situation, meaning that you can face the wide array of 2 situations. Tiger style is built for one-on-one combat with focused strikes that do a lot of damage but might not hit more than one target and generally have slower windups, while the Crane style is the exact opposite. Crane style severely reduces your damage output in exchange for sweeping leg strikes that can damage multiple thugs and control the crowd for you. The problem is that as you go on, you'll find that Tiger style kicks ass 90% of the time and Crane style is for fairies. Even when you get surrounded, the enemies are a little hesitant to actually swarm in on you to do any real damage, meaning that your super strong attacks do just fine, and in a pinch you can always grab a bike and go to town. The other problem is that as the game progresses, Tiger style goes away to college while Crane style sits in his mom's basement eating Buffalo Ranch Pringles. While you pour more and more points into upgrades, you'll start to realize that almost all of them upgrade Tiger style, unlocking way more new heat attacks for you to try out and stuff that gets frankly insanely overpowered near the final quarter of the story. Also, the heat attacks are still fun to pull off, but I wish they weren't tied to the same button as heavy attack, because sometimes I just want to kick a guy in the face, not kick him in the face and then stab out all of his internal organs. You might be thinking, wow, if this guy was trying to sell me this game, he's doing a fucking awful job of it, blissfully unaware of the childhood trauma that caused me to confuse hatred and humor, but I actually have a lot of good things to say about the combat as well. Even if there's less incentive to swap styles, the brawling has a lot of options that are available for both of them, that reward a very heavily action-oriented playstyle. Instead of Yakuza 6, where you spend half the game flattened out on your ass because the game wants to show off how cool the physics engine is, the combat arena allows you to come up with strategies and tactics on the fly, which is awesome because through the whole runtime I never got bored of the combat, which is kind of impressive considering aforementioned ADHD. Opting you to do jump kicks off of walls, leap over enemy heads, and make use of giant sweeping kicks to knock everyone around like a giant terrible haircut wearing bowling ball. Beyond that, it's wearing the skin of Yakuza combat but doesn't carry the same feel because you're basically fighting dirty the entire time, which leads me to the visual quality of the action, which is a boring way to say that this game's style kicks ass. Even though you'll be chilling in a law office for most of the story, the action of the game builds from a very realistic brawler to off-the-walls crazy kung fu movies. And while most of the really cool action is in the spoiler-laden parts of the game, I can happily say that anyone who enjoys that facet of the series will feel right at home here. Even several hours into the game, I never got sick of the street fights. Hell, sometimes I'd play the game and just pick random fights with people while ignoring my several other 100 responsibilities that week. It's a fucking slow burn though at times, I'll tell you that. With over 20 hours of cutscenes and a runtime of 60 hours, be prepared for this to be the game that you have to keep coming back to every couple of weeks once you're done distracting yourself with Buffalo Pringles. Speaking of distractions, this game has a lot of emphasis on minigames, and I promise it's not as scary as it sounds. The lockpicking and thumb bypass ones are pretty harmless in their own right, since you almost never have to fucking do them. The stalking one can be a bit of a slog sometimes, since the Kamurocho Community College is just a series of linear streets. So you can't take alternate rooftops or pathways or side roads, meaning that the main gameplay loop here is to hunch Yagami behind a bench until your target keeps moving like we're playing fucking red light, green light. The chasing mode is usually built into short enough bursts that don't tend to drag themselves out too long. Thankfully, each minigame has a few upgrades that will obliterate any sense of challenge, like the one that lets you take a whole 30 seconds before losing your target in the stalking mode. But you do have to listen to this the moment they leave your general field of view. The only outlier here is the key minigame, where you have to thumb through your keys in order to get past a locked door. Like, I want to play the video game immersive equivalent of trying to get my 4 a.m. drunk ass past my front porch.
Why am I bad?
I never did understand why so many people enjoy the Yakuza side content until now, but only kind of. For a game that is literally recycling the map, combat, and engine, the only real thing the devs could do here was add a fuckload more content, so kudos there, I guess. Here's your gold star. It's nice to see a game that doesn't just bark its side stories at me, but instead presents a narrative much like the Witcher games do. Granted, the characters in these sub-stories are usually just overly passionate person or fucking psychopath, so I'll hold my tongue there. There is a friendship system in which you connect with the citizens of Kamurocho, who will usually provide some kind of buff. For example, if you shop at Japanese Target enough times and eventually get the fucking red card, the cashier will pass you boiling hot snacks to melt people's faces off. Though sometimes the rewards are less than great. One side quest in particular asked me to face this one guy several times, and after fighting him the third, he saw the error of his ways and agreed to help me out in random battles around town. Which sounded like a pretty sweet deal to me until the first fight, and...
Really, guys? And stay down.
And I found out what I actually earned was an incompetent tag-along and one more extra second taken off my life to hear his greeting every fucking time. At the very least, there's a strong feeling that the world is getting that lived-in feeling as Yagami connects with more and more people on the streets. Hell, the chasing, stalking, and breaking everyone's bones is more than enough entertainment to connect you to the city in the first place. Thankfully, in keeping with the detective theme, a lot of the stories are miniature mysteries on their own, often asking you to engage in some bit-sized thriller action rather than just fucking up goons. Some might not even ask you to fight at all, instead presenting riddles or puzzles that can be pretty satisfying to solve. It's a great way to combine Yakuza's habitual bizarre side activities without making them feel copy and paste, which leads me to... Condensing a story this large into a 20-minute video is basically impossible, though I think my favorite thing about the story as a whole is the characters, and I really don't want to miss my chance to fangirl out at least a little bit. The best thing about this is the fact that each character is original from the ground up. I don't need to shrug my shoulders and just assume that a character's development took place in a game from fucking 18 years ago. The main cast starts off with 2 goons and grows to about 5 or 6 central characters depending on who you find important enough to earn that title, while Yagami lacks any heart and depth, and his outfit looks like someone designed a stud 20-year-old and then gave him the face of a 40-year-old. I certainly like his style and charm compared to other series heroes. He'd fall into the TV trope of the badass smart mouth wrapped in that particular brand of gritty Sherlock Holmes detective. Speaking of Sherlock Holmes, his reasoning skills are thankfully on the same level as you, meaning to say stupid and needs Google to solve most of his problems. That's barely even a joke. Kaito is Yagami's +1, your constant meathead buddy that becomes lovable through sheer bro moments. While it's a pretty Saturday morning cartoon combination, I've rarely seen it executed this well, and Crispin Freeman does a wonderful job in bringing Kaito to life. Hoshino is the rookie lawyer that wants to become as cool as Yagami, and Mac on a woman I can assume to be twice his age. Side note, it's so weird hearing Joe Zayega voicing him. I'm constantly expecting him to come up with some sassy Von Reagan voice line and fire that bow, but all he does is get flustered and pee his pants. Higashi is Kaito's sworn brother and the central character of Chapter 4. Higashi's main role is to get the shit beaten out of him 24/7. He's built around this constant struggle of his own loyalties, though Higashi ends up just becoming another heel because of it, but I personally enjoy the way his arc concludes itself. Finally, my favorite, Sugiura, the resident phantom thief, whose job is to be the guy that punches people when Kaito's not around. Then there's McCree, the dickhead cop who likes to get into the way of things because he's a dickhead cop, and last but not least there's Hamura, the story's kind of antagonist until the mole is finally vetted out. I'm sure you might have heard about Soldier 76 over here after his original Japanese voice actor got the game delayed because of his cocaine abuse and the devs were busy bleaching his existence from everything, which seemed a bit extreme to me until I realized I could go on Twitter right now. Anyway, I'm about to get really slow and pretentious and spoil Judgment's main story twist, so if you don't want to see that, skip to the time point in the video. McCree is the killer.
It's Halloween.
Yeah, I did make that in high school, thanks for asking. It brings me back to a time when Life is Strange Episode 5 didn't exist yet. The mole is Detective Kuroiwa, a Kamurocho police officer that's been selling his skills to the drug development known as AD9, with each murder being a cover-up for the lethal side effects demonstrated by the drug's violent attack on its victims, carried out through unethical human testing. I know that's a lot to just drop on the floor, but work with me here, we did just skip from chapter 1 to 12. It's here we find out that he's been working with a meek scientist named Shono who wants to use the drug to cure Alzheimer's disease, except when you fight Kuroiwa, things seem off. And you punch him in the face, and things look like they're about to wrap up until you take 89 to court, only to find that Kuroiwa has doubled back to kill his partner, leaving little Hoshino von Regan to handle the case while Yagami, Kaito, Higashi, and Sugiura rush to stop the mole in one final gambit. What follows is a disturbing slog through the tight corridors and low-lighting environments inside the hospital, until Yagami confronts Kuroiwa and the two fight it out for real. To be serious for a moment, the thing about this final boss fight is that it feels different from other Yakuza boss fights. Most finales in Yakuza are physical struggles that often break into something more interpersonal. The way that they take off their shirts to reveal their tattoos isn't just a way to ramp up the tension, those tattoos signify who and what they are to the world around them, which is why it's so disturbing that this final battle doesn't have any of that. It's two men mercilessly fighting in a hospital during the middle of a rain-drenched night. This isn't a fight between two Yakuza trying to prove their worth. This is a life and death battle between a detective and a rabid serial killer who's shown this entire story to be professional, effective, and not willing to let something as silly as sentimentality stop him from killing. And if you don't believe me, just take a listen to this final haunting track that plays during the fight. Obviously, on the other layer, there is still some bombast, and by now, the action has finally hit its Rumble in the Bronx level of popcorn movie fun, which it absolutely has earned at this point. In fact, I think the ending as a whole is one of the most well-done climaxes in the whole series, which was pretty hard considering how much time they've had to live up to. Though, I hate to be that kid in class holding up his hand.
Excuse me, sir.
But I do want to address some plot holes. I know that those are fucking boring, so I made a spreadsheet and posted them on the screen for anyone who cares. Granted, some of them are kinda silly, but require too much finer detail not to bore you to tears if I tried to vocalize it.
You're a detective?
Afraid so.
I think the fact that if I press Control F on this video and search for the word fucking, my computer lights up like one of those streamers, and that proves that even if I like Judgment, it's certainly flawed in some respects. However, I wrote some motivational shit about how they don't make them like they used to before backspacing it and figured I've cursed my way into this, I'm going to curse my way out. Judgment is not going to be for everyone. If you're into the same story that Yakuza has been telling for years, you won't get an expansion to that. You're going to get a fresh start. Something that takes the same rules and vibes, but puts a new spin on it. One that appeals to those who can't wrap their heads around the J-Station level of deaths, fake-outs, and clan names that the series has previously established. Judgment is a popcorn story that just happens to be the length of a skyscraper. But no matter how much of that popcorn you eat, it never gets stale. Though I certainly wouldn't advise on eating it all in 1 week, that'd be kind of insane. The game's been out for a year now after some reasonable success, and the prices have certainly dropped a little bit thanks to Father Time. There is the idea of a sequel on the tables, and while I disagree with this on the idea that what makes Judgment so great came from its fresh start, I'm not going to say I would turn down another. Especially when Yakuza 7 seems to be committed to the not like the other girls emphasis on turn-based combat that looks just a hair like garbage. So I think the formula present in Judgment is at least worth preserving. On a lighter note, you've made it through 4,000 words of concentrated verbal harassment, and I can go sit back as this accumulates 5 views from people who probably hate me. The lavish life chose me, fellas. I'm going to be experimenting with these videos more as time goes on because making content solely on Dead by Daylight is a way to either go insane or join FaZe, and I can't figure out which is worse. Don't worry, I haven't quit on that content yet. This will just be something to fill the 3-month gap I have between the chapter releases. If you have some thoughts, I'd love to hear them in the comments. All death threats can and will be appreciated, but in the meantime, I'm gonna point at the subscribe button and stuff some cotton in my ears.